your wardrobes.
What we do in them or what?
No, not what you do in them. Now, you've brought with you some clothes because we're going to be looking at glam rock.
Brian Connolly, the golden voice of glam rock and the heartbreak hidden beneath the glitter. He was the iconic frontman of Sweet, the voice behind explosive 70s hits like Ballroom Blitz and Fox on the Run. Brian Connolly lit up stages, topped charts, and defined an era with his electrifying presence. But beneath the dazzling spectacle, a darker truth simmered. Fame brought suffocating pressure, tearing the band and Brian's life apart. His journey spiraled from packed stadiums to lonely bars, from rock star glory to a desperate struggle for survival. In his final years, Brian finally revealed the harrowing truth of what really happened and why he lost everything. Join us as we uncover the astonishing story of the man, the music, and the crushing price of fame. To truly grasp the depth of his journey, we must rewind to the very beginning. Born Brian Connolly in Hamilton, South Lanarkshire in 1945, his start in life was anything but sweet. His teenage mother, Frances Connolly, a waitress, left him in a Glasgow hospital as an infant. The identity of his father remained a lifelong mystery. At 2, he found a temporary haven with Jim and Helen McManus, a kind couple in Blantyre who raised him as their own, bestowing their family name upon him. For years, Brian McManus lived unaware of his true parentage. Then, at 18, his world shattered. The truth of his adoption emerged, shaking him to his core. He reclaimed his birth name, Connolly, a poignant tribute to a mother he never knew. This discovery ignited a lifelong quest for identity. Whispers even linked him to actor Mark McManus of Taggart fame, their striking resemblance fueling speculation they shared a father, adding an intriguing layer of mystery to Brian's already complex story. Originally, Brian envisioned a stable life as an engineer, diligently studying the trade. Yet, a powerful, undeniable current pulled him towards music. His undeniable charm, striking looks, and effortlessly smooth voice made him a natural standout. He couldn't have known then that this voice would soon make him one of the most recognizable singers of the 1970s. Brian's musical odyssey began with Waywright's Gentlemen, a band already making waves in the London club scene. Managed by one of the members' fathers, they played local venues, even competing nationally. A performance at the Lyceum Strand was partially broadcast on BBC One, a tantalizing glimpse of future stardom. The band experienced significant lineup changes, even hosting Ian Gillan, who would later front Deep Purple. When Gillan departed in 1965, Brian Connolly stepped into the spotlight as the new lead vocalist. His talent and electric energy were undeniable. The band's drummer, Mick Tucker, quickly became Brian's closest confidant and future creative partner. Their chemistry was explosive, sparking a shared dream of forging their own path. In late 1967, they left Waywright's Gentlemen seeking a new direction, the genesis of something monumental, the birth of Sweet. In January 1968, Brian and Mick brought their vision to life, forming the Sweet Shop. They recruited bassist and vocalist Steve Priest from the Army and guitarist Frank Torpey, a former bandmate of Tucker's. Their live debut at the Pavilion in Hemel Hempstead on March 9th, 1968, was a modest affair, but their infectious energy captivated audiences. They were fun, catchy, and undeniably unique. Their manager, Paul Nicholas, soon to star in the musical Hair, connected them with producer Phil Wainman, who recognized the band's raw talent. Wainman helped them record their debut single, Slow Motion, for Fontana Records. Just before its release, a crucial change was made. Another artist was using Sweet Shop, so they streamlined it to The Sweet. Simple, memorable, and enduring. Their initial singles, however, failed to ignite the charts. Frustration mounted, leading to Frank Torpey's departure after a year. It was a challenging period, but Brian and Mick's unwavering determination and shared belief kept them going, their bond strengthening through every setback. Torpy's exit ushered in a period of flux. Guitarist Mick Stewart joined in 1969, bringing rock credentials from the Red Caps and Johnny Kidd and the Pirates. The Sweet then signed with EMI's Parlophone label, releasing Lollipop Man, All You'll Ever Get From Me, and Get on the Line. Still, no hits. Despite the continuous setbacks, Brian's conviction never wavered. He knew they were destined for greatness. Then, fate intervened. In 1970, Brian and Mick reconnected with producer Phil Wainman, who introduced them to the burgeoning songwriting powerhouse of Nicky Chinn and Mike Chapman. This duo, renowned for crafting irresistible pop hits, was searching for a band to bring their songs to life. Brian, Mick, and Steve recorded a demo of Funny Funny, backed by session musicians. Wainman's efforts to shop the song to labels immediately generated buzz. Around this time, the band held auditions for a new guitarist, discovering Andy Scott, a Welsh prodigy who had played with Paul McCartney's brother Mike in The Scaffold. Andy seamlessly integrated into the lineup, with Andy on guitar, Steve on bass, Mick on drums, and Brian as the charismatic frontman. The Sweet's classic lineup was complete. Weeks of intense rehearsal culminated in their electrifying live debut on September 26, 1970, at the Windsor Ballroom in Redcar. The chemistry was palpable, the energy explosive. Brian's magnetic stage presence, undeniable charm, and powerful voice were unmatched. They possessed the perfect blend of personality, talent, and style. The world was about to discover their name. From their inception, the Sweet refused to be confined, drawing inspiration from the catchy pop of the Monkees and the Archies. Yet equally drawn to the raw power of bands like The Who, they dared to fuse these seemingly disparate worlds. They blended the joyous harmonies of bubblegum pop with distorted guitars and thunderous drumming, forging a signature sound that would define them. This unique marriage of pop sensibility and hard rock ferocity made them stand out years ahead of their time, laying groundwork for the glam metal explosion to come. Their early journey was modest. Their first album appearance wasn't even their own record. In December 1970, they featured on a budget compilation, Gimme Dat Ding, sharing space with the Pipkins. Andy Scott, though not playing on the tracks, graced the album cover. It was a small but vital step as the band steadily honed their sound. The turning point arrived in December 1970 with their television debut on the pop show, Liftoff, performing Funny Funny. The magic was undeniable. They swiftly signed a management deal with Chinn and Chapman and a global recording contract with RCA Records. Bell Records handled North America, with Phil Wainman as executive producer. March 1971 saw the RCA release of Chinn and Chapman's Funny Funny, which soared into the top 20 internationally, their first taste of widespread success. An EMI reissue of All You'll Ever Get From Me in May 1971, however, still failed to chart. Then came Coco in June 1971, a colossal hit, reaching number 2 in the UK. The follow-up, Alexander Graham Bell, peaked at a respectable number 33. Despite these successes, session musicians often handled the instrumentation, with the band primarily contributing vocals. In November 1971, the Sweet released their debut full-length album, Funny How Sweet Coco Can Be. It showcased their recent singles, new Chinn-Chapman compositions, and pop covers like the Lovin' Spoonful's Daydream and the Supremes' Reflections. Recorded in London with Wainman, Richard Dodd, and Eric Holland, the album, while not a chartbuster, was a crucial milestone, hinting at their immense potential. By 1972, the Sweet were a force of nature. Papa Joe, released in February, hit number 1 in Sweden and Finland and number 11 in the UK. Next, Little Willie and Wig Wam Bam both reached number 4 in the UK. Little Willie became their biggest American hit, peaking at number 3 on the U.S. Billboard Hot 100 after its 1973 reissue. These tracks marked a significant evolution. Wigwam Bam was the first single where the band played all their own instruments, injecting a harder, more confident edge into their sound. January 1973 saw Blockbuster explode to number 1 in the UK, holding the top spot for 5 weeks. Their next single, Hellraiser, reached number 2, and their first American album, The Sweet, arrived in July 1973. The Sweet were now household names. To promote their music, they appeared on iconic shows like Top of the Pops and Supersonic. A memorable Top of the Pops performance of Blockbuster stirred controversy when bassist Steve Priest appeared in a German military uniform with a swastika armband. It sparked complaints, but also underscored the band's willingness to shock. The Sweet fully embraced the glam rock movement, alongside contemporaries like Gary Glitter, T-Rex, Queen, Slade, and Wizard. Their wild costumes, flamboyant makeup, and explosive stage energy were legendary. But behind the glitter, tensions festered. The band resented being pigeonholed as a bubblegum pop act, yearning for recognition as serious rock musicians. Chin and Chapman, their management team, continued to push upbeat, commercially successful singles that didn't reflect the band's evolving sound. To counter this, the Sweet began writing their own heavier B-sides. During live shows, they deliberately avoided their early pop hits, opting instead for their rock tracks and classic medleys. Not everyone appreciated this shift. At a 1973 Killarney concert, the crowd pelted them with bottles. Some blamed their glam appearance. Others claimed the audience simply didn't recognize the songs. This chaotic night famously inspired their hit, The Ballroom Blitz, released later that year. Despite the drama, their popularity soared, especially in the UK, Germany, Denmark, Sweden, and Australia. By late 1973, the band simplified their name to Sweet, a subtle change, but a powerful statement of a fresh start. They were determined to seize control of their music and image, frustrated with Chin and Chapman's commercially successful but creatively restrictive pop mold. They even rejected one of their songs, Dynamite, which later became a hit for another group, Mud. Driven to prove their rock bona fides, they began crafting their own material. With producer Phil Wainman and engineer Peter Coleman, they recorded Sweet Fanny Adams, released in April 1974. This album was a declaration of independence, packed with self-written hard rock anthems like Sweet F.A. and Set Me Free. It unveiled a new, bolder side of the band, loud and uncompromising, shedding the bubblegum label. Their sound was heavier, their image shifting from glam to a more traditional rock aesthetic. The album also showcased their iconic high-pitched vocal harmonies, a signature element of their sound. Tragedy struck during this period. Brian Connolly was brutally attacked in a fight in Staines, sustaining severe throat damage that permanently altered his singing voice. This forced Steve Priest and Andy Scott to step in for lead vocals on tracks like No You Don't, Into the Night, and Restless. Despite specialist treatment, Brian bravely completed the album. Publicly, the band attributed his vocal issues to a throat infection, protecting his privacy. Sweet Fanny Adams didn't spawn any UK singles, but in territories like Japan, New Zealand, and Australia, Peppermint Twist Rebel Rouser hit number 1, a release by the record company without the band's knowledge. Crucially, Sweet Fanny Adams became their only non-compilation album to break into the UK Top 40. Pete Townshend even invited them to open for The Who at Charlton Athletics Football Ground in June 1974. Heartbreakingly, Brian's throat injury forced them to cancel. It was a crushing blow for a band who deeply admired The Who and often covered their songs. Yet, Sweet continued to evolve, transforming from pop idols into true rock icons. By 1978, Sweet was touring the United States, sharing stages with rock legends like Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band. For Brian Connolly, It should have been a pinnacle moment. Instead, behind the dazzling lights and roar of applause, everything began to unravel. From March to May, the band crisscrossed America. Then, on May 3rd in Birmingham, Alabama, the illusion shattered. Capitol Records executives watched in horror as Brian, visibly intoxicated, stumbled onto the stage, his voice slurred, his movements unsteady. Mid-performance, he collapsed, forcing the band to continue without him. It was a defining, devastating moment. The show ended early, leaving Brian and the band deeply embarrassed. Back in Britain, things worsened. His drinking spiraled, fracturing his connection with the band. By the time they resumed the second leg of their U.S. tour later that month, performing with Foghat and Alice Cooper, the internal tension was unbearable. Brian's health and reliability became a constant concern, his bond with his closest bandmates eroding. By early July 1978, as the tour concluded, the cracks in Sweet were impossible to ignore. In October 1978, Sweet convened at Clearwell Castle to develop material for their next album. Writing sessions led to the Townhouse studio in Shepherd's Bush, London, to record Cut Above the Rest. But the band's internal strife followed them. Brian's unpredictable behavior and deteriorating health made recording agonizing, creating a strained atmosphere. Mick Tucker, Brian's longtime friend and fellow founder, was tasked with producing his vocals, hoping their shared history could salvage Brian's performance. Several tracks featuring Brian's voice were recorded, a desperate attempt to recapture the magic. But the results were crushing. Brian's once powerful, commanding voice had lost its strength. The band knew they couldn't continue. On November 2, 1978, Brian Connelly quietly departed from Sweet. A few months later, on February 23, 1979, their manager, David Walker, made the announcement public. The official statement cited Brian's desire for a solo career in country rock. The truth was far more complex. His health, his battle with alcohol, and the widening chasm between him and the band had made his continuation impossible. His departure marked the end of an extraordinary era. After leaving Sweet, Brian desperately hoped to relaunch his career, but fate had other plans. His first solo single, Roger Greenway's Don't You Know a Lady, sadly failed to make an impact. By 1982, his Polydor contract expired, and Brian signed with French label Carrera Records. Record Business magazine announced his new single, Hypnotized, for March 1982, his first solo release in 3 years. The hard rock track, written by Joe Lynn Turner and originally performed by Fandango, was released across Europe via RCA, but again failed to chart. Though he recorded several songs for an album planned for August 1983, it was never released. Still, Brian refused to give up. In January 1983, he opened for Pat Benatar during 3 shows in Birmingham, Newcastle, and London's Hammersmith Odeon. His band, Encore, featured talented musicians like John Verity from Argent and Terry Utley from Smokey. They performed a mix of sweet classics, Windy City, Fox on the Run, Hypnotized, and originals like Sick and Tired, Red Hair Rage, and Burning the Candle. Some of these tracks later surfaced on bootlegs, but as Brian fought to rebuild his musical career, another devastating blow struck. The British tax office, the Inland Revenue, hit him and other Sweet members with a massive tax bill for their past earnings. Millions. To cover his share, Brian was forced to sell his house. Once a titan of glam rock, he was now losing everything he had worked for. By 1984, despite his declining health, Brian returned to touring with a new band, the New Sweet. He performed across the UK and Europe, finding particularly strong support in West Germany, where his concerts often sold out, leading to annual returns even after Germany's reunification. He also played in Denmark and occasionally the UK. But by 1985, his personal life was crumbling. That year, he separated from his wife, Marilyn, their divorce finalized in 1986. A year later, in 1987, a chance encounter brought him back together with Frank Torpe, Sweet's original guitarist. The two old friends recorded a song, Charantina, a small, personal project that evoked memories of better times. The song would remain unreleased until 1998, years after Brian's passing. In 1988, producer Mike Chapman orchestrated a brief reunion of the original Sweet lineup, Brian, Mick Tucker, Steve Priest, and Andy Scott in Los Angeles. They attempted to record new versions of Action and the Ballroom Blitz for a planned MCA Records album, but Brian's damaged voice made progress impossible, and the project was shelved. He returned to the new Sweet, performing whenever he could. In 1990, Brian reunited with the original band members again, this time in London for a documentary event at Tower Records. Around the same time, plans were made for the new Sweet to tour Australia. However, during the long flight to Adelaide, Brian's health took a severe hit. Hospitalized for dehydration and related complications, he was forced to miss several performances. His band finished the tour without him, performing a final show in Melbourne. It became tragically clear that his health could no longer withstand the rigors of touring. Still, he persisted. Throughout the early 1990s, Brian continued performing at festivals and oldies concerts across Europe. In 1992, the band's van was robbed during a performance at the Bristol Hippodrome, and valuable demo tapes of new songs were stolen. As if things weren't difficult enough, legal battles ensued. Brian and Andy Scott clashed over the use of the Sweet name, causing confusion among fans and promoters. Eventually, they reached a truce. Brian's band became Brian Connolly's Sweet, while Andy's was Andy Scott's Sweet. Despite these disagreements, Brian's version of the band continued to perform, even touring the Middle East. In 1994, the new Sweet played shows in Dubai and Bahrain. Around that time, Brian made peace with his former bandmates, Steve Priest and Mick Tucker. He was even invited to Priest's daughter Lisa's wedding, where the two old friends performed together once again. For a brief, poignant moment, the bitterness faded, and the magic returned. In 1995, Brian Connelly made one last courageous attempt to revive his music career. He released a new album, Let's Go, complete with promotional merchandise. It was a defiant statement that he wasn't finished, that he still had music to share. That same year, his personal life found a glimmer of hope. His partner, Jean, whom he had met a few years prior, gave birth to their son. The joy of fatherhood seemed to bring him a measure of peace after years of hardship. Jean also achieved something remarkable that year. She tracked down Brian's biological family. Through her tireless efforts, they located an aunt in Ontario, Canada, who revealed the truth about his birth mother, who had passed away in 1989. Brian also discovered he had a brother and sister, whom he met in England, bringing a profound sense of closure to a lifelong search for identity. However, as his family life found light, his health continued to cast a long shadow. In 1981, Brian had already suffered multiple heart attacks, leaving him with partial paralysis on his left side. Over time, this evolved into a neurological disorder. His health problems were tragically linked to years of heavy drinking, smoking, and the use of prescription medications. Despite his physical struggles, Brian refused to stop performing. He continued touring small venues, including Butlin's holiday camps, playing for devoted fans who still adored him. Then, in November 1996, British network Channel 4 aired a documentary titled Don't Leave Me This Way. It offered a stark, honest look at Brian's rise to fame, the Sweet's fall, and the devastating toll fame had taken on him. In the program, Brian appeared visibly frail, shaking and walking with a limp. Yet, even with failing health, he continued to perform at Butlin's. It was a testament to his unbreakable love for music, a love stronger than his body's limits. Viewers were deeply moved by his unwavering determination. just weeks later. On December 5, 1996, Brian took the stage one last time at the Bristol Hippodrome, performing alongside Slade 2 and John Russell's Glitter Band Experience. No one knew then that it would be his final concert. Behind the applause, his body was failing him more each day, but his spirit refused to surrender. In early 1997, Brian's health deteriorated rapidly. In January, he suffered another heart attack and was hospitalized in Slough. After a week, against medical advice, he insisted on returning home. Just a week later, he was rushed back to the hospital, this time to Wexham Park. On February 9, 1997, Brian Connolly passed away at just 51 years old. The cause was kidney and liver failure, compounded by repeated heart attacks. It was the tragic end for a man who had once set stages ablaze across the globe. His funeral was held on February 17th at the Most Holy Name Roman Catholic Church in Denham, Buckinghamshire. Afterward, his daughters, Nicola and Michelle, scattered his ashes over the water, a final, poignant farewell. He was survived by his ex-wife Marilyn, his partner Jean, and their young son Brian Jr., who had just turned 1. In October 1998, a memorial concert, organized by fans, was held at the Camden Palace in London to celebrate his life and music. Funds raised helped establish a memorial plaque at Breakspear Crematorium in Middlesex, unveiled on February 9, 2000. Years later, in 2013, his son Brian Jr. would bravely follow in his father's footsteps, auditioning for the X Factor. But the full truth about Brian's final years was heartbreaking. The frontman who once dominated the charts with Ballroom Blitz and Fox on the Run died penniless. After being hit with a multi-million-pound tax bill from the Inland Revenue, he had been forced to sell his house to pay his debts. By the end, he was living in a small council flat with Jean and their son, performing modest gigs at Butlins to survive. He had once been adored by millions, but fame had faded, and with it, the fortune it brought. His health had been irrevocably damaged since the early 80s, the first series of heart attacks leaving him weak and partially paralyzed. He never truly recovered. Even in his final years, legal battles over the sweet name continued, adding immense stress to his already fragile life. His last musical effort, the 1995 album Let's Go, achieved only modest sales. Still, he kept performing for his fans, clinging to the one thing that had always truly mattered to him, his music. Brian Connolly's story is a poignant tapestry of glory and heartbreak. Once the golden voice of glam rock, he spent his final years battling illness, financial ruin, and fading fame. Yet, he never stopped performing, never stopped trying. And that is how he will always be remembered. A man who gave everything to his music, even when there was nothing left to give. Do you believe Brian Connolly deserved a more peaceful ending after dedicating so much of himself to music? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more incredible stories from Hollywood's fascinating history. See you next time.